Hey everybody, Aurora Peachy here. Today I'm going to talk about Fissure. So the Fissure of Woe has always been a fan favorite area from Guild Wars 1, and it's been one of the most requested things to return to Guild Wars 2. And with Balthazar entering the story recently, and with a new Menzies themed greatsword in the gem store, if ANET ever decides to add Fissure of Woe into the game, it seems like now would make the most sense. So in this video, I'm going to speculate about what FOW would look like in Guild Wars 2 if it ever were to come back. Now, I'm not really going to talk about lore because, as you know, I'm not really a lore person. So instead, I'm going to talk more about how FOW would look mechanically in Guild Wars 2, seeing as it's a vastly different game than Guild Wars 1. So let's assume that the goal is to have FOW fairly similar in terms of its Guild Wars 1 experience, obviously with its own Guild Wars 2 flavor and with new lore to reflect the current events more. So would it be a raid, a dungeon, a fractal, open world? So the first thing that always seems to be mentioned is a raid. People figure FOW is elite endgame content in Guild Wars 1, so it only makes sense for it to be the most elite type of content in Guild Wars 2, right? Well, when you think about it, there are some pretty major differences between raids in Guild Wars 2 and FOW in Guild Wars 1, at least if we're talking about the way that raids have been implemented thus far. Currently, Guild Wars 2 raids are linear, back-to-back boss encounters with a select few event encounters here and there, and with Wing 4, it was just bosses. In Guild Wars 1, FOW was a large open map filled with trash mobs and quests that you could complete in any order with little emphasis on bosses. So if we're sticking to the current raid format that exists in Guild Wars 2, that really doesn't make a whole lot of sense for FOW. FOW in Guild Wars 1 was fun because of its non-linear exploration aspect, and that wouldn't really work as a traditional Guild Wars 2 raid. Now, I suppose they could just make the new FOW raid just boss-focused and look kind of just like the other raids that are already out there, but I feel like that's not really the type of experience that people are looking for with an FOW reboot. Now, there's nothing that really says raids have to be back-to-back bosses. I suppose they could just change up the format and make it a non-linear, event-focused raid, but for the sake of discussion, let's pretend that ANET doesn't want to overhaul their raid format for purity of purpose, so we'll put that on the side for now. So then what about ANET's other official endgamed instance content, like fractals? Now, format-wise, an FOW fractal does make a lot of sense. We could have a snippet of some Menzies Balthazar conflict in FOW as its own fractal, plus it's already in the mists, so that would work even better. But practically speaking, that would be pretty lame, and I think I can speak for most of the Guild Wars 1 fans that if we finally got FOW back in Guild Wars 2, it would be pretty disappointing if it was just another fractal. Maybe it's my nostalgia kicking in, but I would want FOW to have a more important place in the world than just be some random fractal shard. Like, FOW is this large, vast map, and having it as this tiny, incomplete instance would be a huge letdown, even if mechanically it makes a lot of sense for it to be a fractal. So, what about a dungeon? Since we're already doing heavy speculation, we're going to have to really fantasize to imagine a world where ANET actually makes new dungeons. But let's just entertain that fantasy for a little bit. So dungeons are typically multipath instances that feature events and trash mobs, and as we saw with Ara, they're capable of having massive explorable maps. Now that actually does kind of make sense for FOW. They would have to find a way to tweak the path system to be a little less restrictive, but in terms of the actual dungeon content, it kind of makes sense. Dungeons feature a lot of skippable trash mobs, which were a staple of FOW, and dungeons are event heavy, which would fill the quest role from FOW, so I could definitely see this large FOW dungeon that has an objective to complete all the events in any order with a boss at the end or something. But there's one pretty big deal breaker with this, which is 5-man parties. One of the key things that made FOW fun in Guild Wars 1 was the ability to do the quests in any order and to come up with interesting group splits to clear it as efficiently as possible. And with 5 people in the party, this wouldn't really work too well. Now, for a fractal, 5 people would work because it would likely just be this tiny little snippet of FOW, but we're assuming if it's a dungeon, it's coming with the full FOW experience. and a 5-man party just wouldn't cut it. And let's be real, ANET isn't making any new dungeons anytime soon. Now, I guess they could make FOW an open world map, but that would be so incredibly lame that I don't even want to think about what that would be like. So I'm not even going to entertain the idea. That would be so stupid. Please don't make FOW open world. Just don't. Now, in a perfect world, I think FOW would be best to be its own standalone thing, like this new elite instance type thing with a open, non-linear set of objectives that need to be completed. Basically just like a carbon copy of what it was in Guild Wars 1, but I don't think ANET's going to release another form of instance content. So given the 3 that already exist, and despite the differences, I do think that a raid does make the most sense. But like I mentioned earlier, they would have to format it way differently than the current raids. So instead of it being like a set of bosses in a specific order, it would need to be more open and have more focus on events and mob patrols and wide open spaces. And the objectives should be non-linear, meaning that you could do them in any order. Now, the 10-man squad system would be great for doing interesting splits and stuff like that, and crazy strategies where people solo stuff and another team's off doing an event somewhere, and then they all meet up. And since it would be a raid, I think it would be alright if they squeezed in a few bosses here or there. Maybe like a medium boss somewhere at the halfway point, and one big last boss that spawns after all the objectives are completed throughout the zone. But I wouldn't want that to be the focus. Like if FOW was just like a bunch of bosses, I think it would lose what made it special. Now, if FOW were to become a raid in Guild Wars 2, that would come with the inevitable whining about how Guild Wars 1 lore is locked behind hard content. Well, you know where else Guild Wars 1 lore was locked behind hard content? In FOW in Guild Wars 1. But the whole raids lockout story nonsense is its own topic that might get its own video someday, but after I triggered so many people over my Provisioner Tokens tutorial for some reason, I'm going to stay away from controversial stuff for a while. Anyways, even with all the leaks and hints, I don't really have any idea if FOW is coming. Like, we don't know, so this is pure speculation. And like I said, if ANET is going to drop FOW at any point, it would kind of make a lot of sense to do it now or soon, especially with an expansion coming soon. And that would be a great way to entice veterans of the series to come back. And maybe some of the Guild Wars 1 diehards would finally check out Guild Wars 2 if FOW came back. And I'd love to see it return. And if it was done correctly, it would be amazing, if not more fun than the original. So something to think about. Also, I know Obby Armor is like a super requested feature, and they could easily throw that in as a reward. Like, they could just make the recipe like the exact same. We have ectos, we have shards, we have cloth, and all that stuff in the game already, so it's like, just put in the same recipe. And there you go. Oh, but it takes them like 10 years to make a set of armor, so never mind. It's probably off the table. Just make it an outfit in the gem store instead.